Yeah.
Let's jump into it first. Is this my floor since it's Florida State, Miami first? Yeah. Listen, I've had a lot of people ask me. So Florida State loses to Miami by 6. Game not that close, but fortunately the box score and the final score, made it look a little bit better than it was. At the end of the day, Florida State came into this game the less talented team, and then they played worse too. And that's really, to me, that's the end, the beginning and the end of kind of my thoughts. I wasn't really disappointed. I wasn't really upset as a Florida State fan and supporter. They are not as good of a team as Miami. And I said that I thought Miami would win this thing 6 or 7 out of 10 times. Maybe I would up that at this point. But I was counting on Florida State to be sharper and them to execute better than they did and steal one. And I even said, like, if they win this, they're stealing it. And they didn't do that. They came out and played worse than I think I could have not expected, but they didn't execute well, had too many first half turnovers, dug themselves too deep of a hole. And then, even in the quasi comeback, I think a lot of that was Miami just playing pretty conservatively and just trying to get out with the win, knowing that Florida State was at one point down 5 scores in the fourth quarter, and it would have taken miracle after miracle for them to win. Credit to the team for not quitting. I know Florida State fan wants to hear, great job not quitting. Last year, that would have turned into a 40-point loss. So, it's certainly better to make it close and have some kind of positivity heading into next week than what would have happened last year. That is good. But I went into that game thinking that Miami was the best team in the country, and I came out of that game thinking that Miami was the best team in the country. I said that you couldn't let them run all over you, and you had to make Beck beat you, and that's absolutely what he did. So credit to Carson Beck and Malachi Toney, who's an absolute freak of a freshman. They got behind your defense a couple of times and put you behind the 8 ball really, really early, and you just weren't efficient enough to think that you had a chance to come back. I really thought that Florida State needed to get out to an early lead, capitalize like they did against Alabama, and let the crowd and the defense kind of help them along through the rest of the game. And certainly that's not what happened. So I wasn't even really that frustrated. Again, I thought this was the best team coming into Doak Campbell in the country. And I think that they still are and should be the number 1 team. Again, if people want to put Ohio State first, that's fine. But I think that you lost to a really good team because you didn't play very well and because they've recruited much better than you and they have more talent than you. Florida State's season, it all kind of comes down to how they do against teams that now they are going to be better than for much of the year. They're going to be better than Pitt. They're going to be better than Wake. They're going to be better than Stanford. And so they should get to November at 6-2 with winnable games left. Virginia Tech, NC State. I don't really know what Clemson and Florida are because I don't really know what, they'll look like over the next month after Florida gets a big win against Texas. I also think that Texas is complete trash, and we'll talk about them in a minute. But you've got a lot of winnable games left on the schedule. I think you're probably looking at between 8-4 or 9-3. I don't think they run the table having to go on the road twice. But I think they've got plenty of time to rebound. And if you get to the end of the year and you have 9 wins and you can get a 10th in a bowl game or something like that, you'd certainly call that a pretty successful year, especially because Virginia might end up being really good too. They got a good win at Louisville. And then for Miami, if you don't trip up, you're probably going to be a top 4 seed in the playoff and have a bye. I don't really see a situation with their schedule remaining where that's not the case. Maybe if you drop 1 in the regular season and drop a 2nd in Charlotte, then you don't get that first round bye, but you're probably still a home playoff team at that point. So everything's laid out in front of Miami. I don't think we'll learn a lot more about them through the rest of the year. I think we'll find out really how good they are once we get to December and they play in Charlotte and then in the playoffs. So a great win for the Canes. They took care of business, about what I expected from Florida State, and kind of needed a couple of miracles to go your way, but it just wasn't your night and you were up against it anyway. So whoever wants to take over after my crying is more than welcome to. I'll get right back to the video, but first, let me tell you about Sleeper's brand new promotion. We've been telling you guys about them for over a month now, but if you've been waiting to deposit because you're cheap like me or just don't want to put money in, you don't have to wait anymore. Sleeper will offer you a free $20 right now with no deposit required. Use our code CFA for a free $20 entry. First-time users still get that 100% deposit match up to $100. But if you've been waiting to deposit, you can go play right away. We'll talk about Sleeper more on our Wednesday live on the Power 2 when we play the more or less game before this weekend's action. Make sure to check out Sleeper's terms of use because terms and conditions do apply, but appreciate Sleeper for their support. Run and get your free $20 right now by using our code CFA.
I mean, a credit to Miami. They've found multiple ways to win this season, and that's the hallmark of a great team. It's been talked about the entire season. This is maybe the best offensive line, defensive line combination in America. They played a disciplined game. They weren't stellar on third down in this game. Not to say that Florida State was, but to be able to overcome that and play a relatively mistake-free game, Miami's got just about everything you can ask out of a football team here in 2025. The turnovers really hurting Florida State in this one. I understand the thought process of let's try and take away the running game of Miami in this game. And to the points I just said, they were limited. The Hurricanes were limited rushing the football. But Carson Beck, like he's steady Eddie, man. And like 20 for 27, nearly 300 yards passing and 4 touchdowns is beyond steady Eddie. But still, like, this is as complete of a football team as out there right now. So there's no shame in this for Florida State. And I think there's still a lot in front of them. There's still that outside chance you can make the college football playoff. But honestly, looking at the way that the rest of the schedule goes, I don't think Miami loses in the regular season unless they lose focus to somebody that is beneath them. And if Georgia Tech pulls off a miracle in Atlanta at the end of the season against the Bulldogs, you could have 2 undefeated teams playing each other for the ACC championship with both teams potentially guaranteed to go to the college football playoff. So it's an exciting time right now for the ACC because I think what we thought the conference was going to be in the offseason, vastly different. I think Miami, people were expecting to be there. Florida State, able to make some noise and cause some ruckus. But this is far from over, I think, for Florida State. But you ran into a damn good team. There's no shame in that.
I mean, I did have Georgia Tech in the playoffs, so I'm excited to see what they can do. TJ, let me just say, if I can, for the Seminole fans, give you a bit of serendipity. If we told you that you were 3-2 after this game, but your losses were to Alabama and Miami, nobody would have a second guess.
Yeah, that's what I predicted. That's what
that's the difference, is that you take out a win against a team that, excuse me, feels like it's back in the running to be the top roster in the SEC, and you lose to a Virginia team that, we got to give credit. They're a couple of plays away from being undefeated in the ACC and sitting at 6-0 heading into their bye week. I mean, that's just credit where credit's due. I mean, you're not going to take that as negativity when both those teams have been able to kind of show you that they've turned the corner. I am in full agreement with you, and I like to apologize. This is to a certain extent. I never doubted Miami. I thought Miami was going to win. I thought Miami was going to cover. I have doubted Carson Beck before. Again, there's something about the Shannon Dawson offense that just makes quarterbacks feel so at home and very much in their own element, and the version that we always embodied them to be when talking about them in such a prominent light. Again, we watched it last year every single time with Cam Ward. Carson Beck, 20-27, 4 touchdowns through the air, 8.9 yards to throw. I mean, he was wheeling and dealing. He was making plays at the right time. What I thought was interesting is that Miami took its foot off the gas because, again, you look at the numbers and you say, well, it was a 28-22 game. It wasn't like it really wasn't until Miami said, you know what, we're going to take things off a little bit too slow. And then we allow Florida State to work their way back in. If Miami wanted to, they could have hung another 20 points up on them, and it wouldn't have shocked me because that's how legit the offense looks right now. Malachi Toney is a stud. I mean, the way that we talked about Jeremiah Smith last year, it's maybe not at that level in terms of his overall attributes, but I would say it's the closest comparison to Ryan Williams right now. He has just been everything that you could imagine, and then some. I clearly am just blown away by the way that he has been able to master this offense, a very intricate offense that's known for being a heavy passing attack, and take on over as the number one. It also helps you have other guys breaking on out. Elijah Lofton had a pretty good day. CJ Daniels has been a perfect fit for what this offense wants to do. Alex Bowman's made some plays as well. So they're a multifaceted team. And the defense, once again, Corey Heatherman has just found a way to be able to kind of slow down all of the talk of what was a problem last year and throw it to the wayside. It was an incredible hire by Mario Cristobal, and he got after Gus Malzahn, and he made him pay very early on. It was something that I think that ultimately came back to be an issue to where you got to ask yourself, What does Florida State have to do to be able to fix this? Maybe it's nothing because of it just was a good team that you faced off against. For Florida State, the problem that I worry about for them at this point is you have got to start off fast, because I don't think that you're going to be able to play up to a certain level and come away with a win every single week when you're trailing by 10, when you're trailing by 14. And we've noticed that now in two different instances where Virginia got up on you, you were able to at least bring this back to a tie, then you started to fall apart, you need to force your way into overtime. Miami got up on you, they took their foot off the gas, you kind of made this thing a 4-quarter battle. You got to run the football more efficiently. Tommy Castellanos, he can't be the only answer on the ground, and you got to find a secondary wide receiver. Again, this is another game where Deuce Robinson had a good day. 6 catches, 87 yards. And yeah, you found your way into the end zone with Randy Pittman and LaWayne McCoy, but both of them finished with under 40 yards. You got to be able to have somebody else that can be a separator to take pressure off of number 0. And if those things don't end up working out, it's still a solid year for Florida State. The good news is that, once again, they already have more wins at this point than they did all of last season. And they're going to win more games, and they're probably going to be at 8-4 range. But there are some things that you wonder about. If we just did this differently, would we be sitting at maybe 5-0, or at least sitting at 4-1? And that's some things that I think are going to be really, really important when you go play against Pitt and just kind of get back to the level of what we knew about them. I'm not doubting when it comes to Florida State at all. I still think that they could be a solid team in the ACC, which does good for the ACC long term. As for Miami, Miami has crossed off almost every single box that you want to ask, knowing that you are a team good enough to be in the college football playoff. Here's just what I wonder. Can you make sure that when you are going to be playing B+ football, that B+ football is still better than the A+ of the opposing team, and that you are going to take your foot off the gas? Because all things according to plan right now is that Miami's going to go undefeated and make it all the way to Charlotte and go to the college football playoff. But we've seen this story play out before, where they took their foot off. They said, you know what, we're going to play around with our food a little bit too long, and then you get nearly an upset against Cal, and then nearly you get the Virginia Tech game, and then you lose to Georgia Tech last year, and you lose to Syracuse. And that's where we are. Doesn't mean that it can't happen. But again, this is what we got to see. That's the only question I have left for Miami. If they don't play with their food, they're undefeated. I mean, this is the most complete roster in college football. And I am in agreement. They are the number 1 team in the sport.
They have a bye before they play Louisville at home next week. So, we all kind of questioned the bye situation for Miami, Florida bye, Florida State bye. It actually probably works out really good to have a bye after a very emotional, not super difficult, but a very emotional win on the road. Probably their most difficult game left on the schedule is Louisville, and they get a bye before that. Now, again, November and just having to go on the road so much like they will later, that does present some challenges. But I don't even think it, looking at it now, their schedule sets up pretty well, and they can afford a loss, right? You beat Louisville at home, and you're in really good shape to even play with a little bit of house money if you're Miami going down the stretch. For Florida State, I do think that Pitt game is absolutely massive. Pitt scored 48 on Boston College. Now, BC had 3 turnovers and 2 turnovers on downs, and so they made it pretty easy for Pitt to just kind of run up the score. Pitt's a capable team that can certainly score points. I do think BC is an absolute dumpster fire. Certainly, you just look at them being 1-4 right now, 0-3 in the ACC, and you look at what Pitt's done throughout the rest of the year. They're now no longer playing Holstein, which is interesting. But shoot, their backup went out and threw for 300+ yards against, again, a terrible BC team that is just not capable of anything. But Florida State, a 10-point favorite. They need to bounce back and win this week. If they win this week, I think they beat Stanford. I think they beat Wake, and they go into November 6-2, which at that point, I don't want to say you're playing with house money, but you could win any of the 4 games that are left. Shoot, you could. Well, Virginia Tech's terrible. You could lose 3 of the 4 that are left too, when you think about 3 of them being in Raleigh, Clemson, and Gainesville. So that's all I have on FSU. We'll see how they bounce back.
For Miami, before we get out of here, the reason why I think of that game against Louisville, maybe your toughest test ahead, it's a Friday night game. Again, something different about not playing on Saturday that maybe is going to eventually be a problem that hurts you a little bit coming off of a bye. The other thing is that, again, this is your last bye. And I hate that the ACC did this to you, gave you 2 byes within 3 weeks of each other. But you've gained room for error, because if you look like the most complete team, when you're able to capitalize on turnovers, shows that. Friday night, let's see what you look like against Louisville.
The ACC loves screwing Florida State and Miami. Just Florida State plays two. Every team thinks the conference is out for them in every conference you're in. Miami with the terrible bye situation. Florida State playing 2 road Friday night games in conference. Like, what are we doing here? So yeah, screw. They can die in a fire.